Thank you,
are you? This
Melinda.
is Sangeeta Roy.
No problem. Thank you.
So, yes, welcome on stage, David Wolf, for the Day 2 Global Virtual Summit 2025. So, before you start your presentation, I would like to introduce you to the audience. David Wolf, a seasoned music composer, a producer, has worked in radio, television, film, podcast, and audiobooks for major brands like NBC Universal, Disney, and Discovery Channel. As the founder of Adivita Studios, he helps thought leaders grow their brands through audio content. His talk leveraging the power of your voice is podcast and audiobooks, using voice to expand, influence, and impact. Wow, that's really a great introduction of David World. So please do start your session and speakers are waiting to listen your presentation. Good luck.
Thank you so much, Melinda, and hello to everyone. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. I'm going to go ahead and go into presentation mode here because I've got some slides handy. So let me do that. Hmm. There we go. That should do it. Hopefully you can see that.
Yes, we can see your presentation, David.
You're okay? Okay,
Yes.
great. Excellent. So I just want to make sure. Okay, hold on. Oh, I see. Okay, very good. I'm new to the platform. Well, it's great to be with everyone today. And I've been experiencing. We're of course in the midst of a communications revolution. So this quote, I don't know if it's exactly anonymous, but it may be something that I created. But we are all, in fact, in the communications business right now. Content creation and distribution is no longer a nice to have, but it's absolutely essential. It's essential as a component of your marketing and communications life, really. Whether you're a professional, a business owner, a solo practitioner, um, whether you're functioning in society, in any country, anywhere, we've essentially become media enterprises, whether from small to large. And and so my evolution has really tracked a lot of this development. Um, trying to move on. There we go. So because of my age and when I appeared as a composer and producer in media, I experienced this explosion and this transformation from broadcasting to social casting. So in the US, broadcasting was three television stations: NBC, CBS, and ABC, and a handful of radio stations. But it was very, very narrow and very, very centric to large corporations. And that's, I think, the key to all of this. What we've experienced is going from scarcity of channels available to an evolution of democratized media where every human on the planet can now have a voice in the world. And frankly, that's what I've built my business around, and many people that are in the business I'm in have done. Um, so, with democratized media, everyone has a voice. Um, I like to call this a voice brand. Um, it Let me just see if okay. So it's the power of your voice. It's this voice brand that allows you to share, to communicate, to promote, to educate, to entertain. So this voice brand thing is something I really like to think about. Um, Also, because of hypermobile and the cell phone and the ability for anyone anywhere to be streaming media now, this has really made it so accessible for everyone. And a lot of this, I'm stating the obvious, but I just kind of want to step through some of these evolutionary the explosion of media and the democratization of media. It's so essential. So now we have apps, we have multiple channels, we have social media. Certainly, our business is focused on voice and now video, and it's a two-way system. Historically, when we had the three television networks and a handful of radio stations, it was one way. Now, if we choose to, we can have a two-way conversation, engaging and integrating a call to action mechanism to help communicate with our audience. And so that's become essential to this idea of a two-way experience. Melinda gave me a little bit of an intro, but I just wanted to recap some of this. And it might be interesting from the standpoint of women in leadership or people in leadership. And my path was like this. So um, I thought it would be interesting to share from the entrepreneurial perspective. So I was a very creative person as a child, and became a music player. I was a drummer originally, and then keyboardist. I grew up in Chicago, the Midwest here in the U.S., and I reached a point where I wanted to grow out of just being contained by one instrument and have the whole orchestra, if you will, at my fingertips. So I found the music for advertising business and learned how to write and score music for radio, TV, film, commercials, and so forth. So this was an escape from this single environment with just drums and keyboards into a much broader capacity, and much more capacity to earn money as well. The way I did this was I created commercials that were hypothetical. They had not actually been on the air, and I created them from print advertisements. So I took print advertisements and I made them musical, and then produced the music, working with experienced recording session players, and musicians and singers. I eventually founded Crywolf Music Incorporated in Dallas, Texas, back in 1985, and ran that with my wife for about 15 years, and then decided at some point that I wanted to scale and make the business less about me writing and creating something, a piece of creation, a musical piece, and more about scaling and having an impact on a broader audience. So we started Auto Vita Studios in 2019, and since then we've grown a team of 7 full-time employees and about 30 um, freelancers all over the world, in Europe and in the US, of course. And we're thriving. We produce about 200 audiobooks a year and about 50 podcasts in production. So I wanted to talk a little bit about how some of our clients are leveraging the power of their voice in with podcasts. We have a few clients that I've and partners that I've chosen here. The Rich Dad Network is a podcast network that features the work of Robert Kiyosaki, who's done a lot of work around gold and real estate investing, and really how to empower women and men worldwide to save and thrive financially. So what we did there was we leveraged his many years of legacy brand. The book he wrote was some 45 years ago, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and leveraged that into a whole network of video and audio podcasts in order to educate his audience and engage them to buy more published materials. They have many books now out, and also monetize the network with advertisers that are in the gold and real estate and crypto space. So that's the model for the Rich Dad Podcast Network. That's one way to approach podcasting in terms of an enterprise level. Another use case was the spa. We have a spa in the Southwest U.S. that was had celebrities coming to do health, uh, a whole regiment of health, ranging from colonics to completely changing their diet to fasting to all kinds of interesting things, massage, of course. And so we took these celebrity interviews and we shot them very high end with 3 cameras in a studio environment, and projected their brand onto the market in order to share the stories of these celebrities who they know, and share the experience of the spa, the entire experience from front to back when they get there, and all the activities and how it's changed and transformed them from a health and wellness standpoint. Edible Communities is a magazine. So it started as a print magazine that is a franchise system across the USA. And it features everything foodie. So it's chefs, interviews, spirits, microbreweries, local businesses that are in the food space, and as a podcast. So what they did there was they rotated through all the markets that they distribute this magazine in throughout the U.S. and North America, and interviewed them and created articles, and then created audio and podcast interviews from those articles, and the same content was often featured. So fascinating model, because it took print and a print publication into moving media, the power of their voice. Um, Understanding Today's Narcissist was, interestingly, a psychologist that specializes in the phenomenon or the disorder called narcissism, and she was basically, again, educating her audience about how to cope with narcissism in the workplace, narcissism in their families, and everywhere that it might be occurring, whether you're the victim of a narcissistic person or you are narcissistic. uh, Fascinating series, another example of leveraging the power of Christine Hammond's voice. Stories in the Room, you're familiar with Michael Jackson. So this particular series interviewed all of the musicians that played on Michael Jackson's Thriller album about 40 years ago, and celebrated the experience of working with Quincy Jones and Michael Jackson in a very intimate way, with interviews with the singers that sang backup, excuse me, guitarists, all of the players that worked with Quincy and Michael in the studio as they produced the great album Thriller, the best-selling album of all time. So another example, another way to leverage the power of that voice. And finally, lead with your brand. Many of you in the audience, I know, are thought leaders and aspiring thought leaders. And there's no better way to get your voice out into the marketplace and hear and build your fan base than a podcast. So I just wanted to walk through a few different ways that our clients are using podcasting to grow their business. I want to talk a little bit about the podcast distribution ecosystem. Of course, I'm operating in the US and Europe. So, I know we have a broad international audience here. So if you have any questions that come up following this session, I'm sure my contact information can easily be found. But we have, in our world, we started in really the podcast space started with audio only. So it was the power of sort of this intimacy of radio like experience in the market through hypermobile, through cell phones, and possibly on computers to just listen. But what's happened over the last few years, as many of you know, with the advent of Google and YouTube, is has exploded into video and audio now. So as a production company, we now find ourselves producing both, usually companion audio and video together. Um, some people ask us what's more important, where should I focus? Should it be audio or video? And the answer is a non-answer. It's because it's quite flexible in terms of what it is you're trying to accomplish, the nature of the material, and of course, consumer behavior. But what many are writing about and observing is that YouTube is slowly taking over as a podcast discovery environment, because it's so easy to search. Of course, with the integration of Google, search and YouTube now go hand in hand. So if you have an audio and or a video audio podcast out on the major podcast systems, it's very important now to include YouTube, even if it's only an audio version, to include YouTube, because of the ability to search for consumers and find your podcast. Then they can subscribe on YouTube, or they can subscribe on any of the major audio feeds, such as Apple, Spotify, iHeart, and so forth. There are many, many of them, and we distribute to all of them, of course. Um, when we are first working with a new client, we're launching a podcast. Many of them ask, "How do I monetize my podcast?" So this is an interesting question to unpack. Uh, Again, whatever the size of your business, monetization, really, there's three basic ways that you can monetize, and there are branches to the tree, but the three major ways are starting with what I call the audience of one. And the reason it's the audience of one is because when you're first starting a podcast series from ground zero, no audience, nothing, the best way that you can monetize the work you're doing with your podcast is to invite people on your show that you want to engage with, create that intimate relationship with them while you're recording, and and um, and from that create an engaged and a relationship that could turn into business for you. So it's a relationship building mechanism in lieu of calling a potential client and asking them to be a client for a sales call. Now you can reach out to your prospects or people you're interested in working with and simply ask them and invite them to be on your show. Very rarely will they say no, and it creates a powerful environment to engage them. Um, the next level is as you're beginning to build your audience, um, there are two layers of advertising revenue that are available to you as a podcaster. The first is called programmatic ads, and what programmatic ads do is they bring advertisements in that are pre-produced in from a network, an advertising network, and then they're placed at the beginning, middle, and end of your podcast series. So now you can begin to generate a little bit of revenue. You're starting to grow your audience. You've leveraged the power of one. The guests that you're inviting are creating traction because they're promoting their appearance on your podcast. The audience development is happening. It's not huge amounts of money, but it's beginning to move into the direction of advertising monetization. And then finally, as your audience matures and as you hit the threshold of, say, 10 or 15, maybe 20 million, sorry, 20,000, that's 1,000, 20,000 listeners streaming each of your episodes, that's per episode. Now we can begin to facilitate advertising coming in as you reading the host, reading the spot as the host, that is. So this is very powerful for advertisers because you as the host of your show have the most powerful connection to your audience. So what advertisers have learned is they can leverage that connection you have with your audience, the power of your voice, to share with the audience their product, their service as a testimonial. And a lot of money is moving from the advertising space into the podcast space as a result of this. So those are the three basic ways that you monetize, in terms of advertising revenue. Finally, you can talk about affiliate relationships where you have partnerships with companies where you share a link or information about it as the host, and you can earn percentages of money as you're sharing about that product. Each time a purchase or a transaction happens, you're paid as an affiliate. Um, for your own business, you're a podcaster, you're the center of the show, you're the host. It's the power of your voice, your brand. You can use the podcast to build a fan base and then drive them to your funnel to generate interest and sales, and eventually a relationship and then transactions. If all goes well, you'll begin to generate revenue from your own product or service from your own podcast. So the other thing that people ask us when they're starting a podcast is how frequently should I publish? And ideally, a weekly show is perfect because you're building momentum with your audience. Every week, they know you're going to drop a new episode. Every week, they know where they can find you. And again, just from the repetition and that frequency, it builds a lot of momentum. We do have some podcasters that publish, let's say, an interview or a long form, and then they'll do a couple of short forms, just monologue, just them and the audience to support their brand around the longer form. So it's a combination of a long and a couple of shorts, or a long and a short. That's a very powerful strategy as well. Some of our clients that are coming in new, they might be budget constrained for production, so they'll publish every other week, and that maybe is the second best way to participate in the podcast space. Uh, so some tips there. So the podcast production, the production of your show, be it video or audio. Um, Again, we talked a little bit about the comparison of video and audio. They really coexist now in the market. So ideally, you're doing both and you're releasing both. What we say to our podcast clients that are coming in new is don't get too focused on the microphone and the headphone and the camera. There are a lot of good cameras and microphones out there. We recommend them to our clients when they first come in. The webcams that are built into most desktop or laptop computers are very good. Where I'm sort of biased to Macintosh, so those cameras look and sound great. It is a good idea to get a microphone, and we have microphones that we recommend. But what we try to do is really strip all of the technology, the drudgery of those things away from you, so that you can just show up and be yourself and connect with your audience in a compelling way. So that's the idea here. Focus on the content, focus on the design of your show. And there are a lot of possibilities for the design of your show. It's really a blue sky phenomenon. Of course, most of the middle market podcasters tend to do what I call the bookend interview. There's an intro. They introduce the client to come in. The guest. There's a conversation. The conversation can be on script. It can be highly disciplined and just Q&A, or it might be free flowing. But that's the interview format, and then you go out. So this is the most simple and least expensive way to produce a podcast. Begin to get your voice out into to the world and engage with your guests. The narrative podcast really dives into the art of storytelling. It's almost like mini documentary, if you like. And it requires more money to produce. There's a spectrum of how fancy you can be in doing it, but it's more about storytelling. You might be connecting with your audience directly, and then you cut away to B-roll where you're featuring other video or other stories or cutaways that are important, and then come back to you. That's one way to do it. As I say here in the slide, this hybrid and creative approaches. And when we first meet with a client to start a podcast, we explore all the possibilities of form and format. Because there are so many podcasts in the universe, um, it's it's important to keep it interesting and try to stand out, of course. And the way to do that is to mix up your format and make it interesting, turning corners, keeping it exciting. The art of surprise is good, and also the art of ritual, so that your listeners know, oh, there's this ritualistic thing that happens in every show, and they know they can expect it, and that builds their relationship more. So some ideas there. Um, some people ask about AI. Of course, we can't have a conversation about podcasting or anything communications without some discussion about AI. Excuse me. So we're using AI for um, the back office operations, and what I mean by that is we can create show notes from the transcription of an interview or a show, and then optimize them using AI to make them key search or keyword search optimized. So that's one example. We can automate the creation of short clips coming from the long form. So you do the long form interview, and now you've got short clips that you can pull out and put on social media to promote each episode that you produce. So we use AI Assist for that as well. Those are some back office examples. We are also able to produce literally interviews uh, using AI and cloning a guest voice and a host voice. So all of these things are possible now, which streamlines the production, allows you to produce more often at a lower cost. Um, and of course, AI is, it's not the same as humans, as we all know. You have to be selective about how and where you use it, but it is possible to create a full podcast now, whether you're using the Google Notebook platform or we're doing it for you. You can, really create a lot of content, interview or otherwise, using AI and using AI voice generation. So it's a very exciting time, a little bit scary in some ways, but we're involved in that market. And if you have questions about that, you can find me later. So our company is not only a podcast company, but we're also an audiobook production company. And so we partner with publishers and hybrid publishers and self-published authors to help them produce their manuscript in audiobook format for distribution across Amazon, Audible, and Apple Books. And then there are also are about well, I'll talk about distribution in a moment, but why would you want to do an audiobook in the first place? If you're a thought leader, you're having an impact on the world, you want to promote your impact on the world, you want to get your voice out in another way, uh, take your book from print to audio so that people can experience your book while they're multitasking. This has been a total explosion. Audiobook market is absolutely positioned now to explode. I've got some numbers here. I'll pull them up if I can. Uh, well, let's see. Something happened to my file here. Anyway, I have some data on the audiobook market and the explosion of it. Oh, here we go. So there are more than 70 million audiobooks produced annually just in the United States alone. That's today in 2024, basically. The market in audiobooks is currently at 7 billion in sales worldwide, and it's expected to grow to 35 billion by 2030. So that's more than 36% year over year growth. It's absolutely spectacular. So clearly, consumers are choosing audio, and this shift in consumer behavior has been driving the market. And so, as an author, thought leader, business owner, practitioner, professional, um, to capture your book, first of all, to write a book, and then to have it in audio with your voice narrating is very, very powerful way to connect. In fact, about 70% of the work we do is working with an author to read their own manuscript. And we have a whole system that we do this with. It's a very powerful way to connect. And it establishes a long, long form of communication with your and connection with your audience. Again, that intimacy of audio, that's true in podcasting, it's true in audiobooks. There's a tremendous it's really started with radio. It's a very intimate relationship that happens. um, so there's fiction and there's nonfiction. As I mentioned, about 70% of our work that we do is authors reading nonfiction, their own work, business books, maybe a memoir, other types of educational materials that support their brand, their voice, and the knowledge that they have. We also do produce a lot of fiction works. We have a casting team, and we go out and we produce using our casting database to find the perfect voice for their audiobook. So that's part of our process. And so that's sort of an overview on the audiobook side of things. One of the things, particularly an author that is a thought leader, such as a lot of people in this audience, I suspect, or a business owner, they ask, well, should I narrate or should I get talent to narrate? And again, we really, if you're up for it, we recommend that the author narrate. Back to AI, we also have a program where we clone an author's voice, and we then can use their voice for production for the entire audiobook. If they're time constrained, they don't have the time to record with us the full book, we can spend about 30 minutes, maybe an hour with them, clone their voice, and then use that for production. So that works in nonfiction, but not so much in fiction. If your fiction work has a lot of dialogue and a lot of emotional content and a spectrum and emotional range, AI doesn't do such a good job of that yet. So we tend to dissuade our clients from using AI voice generation for fiction works. Other ways we produce audiobooks, sometimes we have multiple voices in a single audiobook. That's possible. It's more complex to produce, but it's something we've seen and we've done, where the author maybe is the narrator, and then they have some other voices in the book. that are playing different characters or playing out some different scenes, dramatized nonfiction, for example, those sorts of things. Again, if anyone has questions about the possibilities, they can reach out to me later. Um, there are a lot of technical considerations for audiobooks. So I say there, don't try this at home. The major distributors, such as Amazon and Audible and Apple, they have very stringent audio specifications for audiobook distribution. So you need to really know what you're doing. So just recording on your iPhone and then hoping to upload it and get it into a distribution, that's not going to work. You really need the help of a professional to get the files technically in compliance with the audiobook distributors. Moving on, the distribution world for audiobooks, I telegraphed this a little bit already. The big three, which represents about 70-80% of the market, and is facilitated through ACX, is Amazon, Audible, and Apple. But there are 50 other places that you can, roughly 40 to 50 other places on the planet where you can distribute. These are niche apps like Kobo and Audiobooks Now and Chirp, and they enable an author to sell more horizontally distribute their audiobook. It's also possible for you to sell your audiobook directly from your own website or link. And we've set up many authors to do that. If maybe they just don't want to be on the big three, they want to have a little bit more control of who they're selling to, capturing their emails of who buys their book. There are apps and shopping cart like technology that can enable you to sell your book directly like that. Okay, so finally, I just want to say thank you. I'll leave some time for questions, Q&A, and then like that. But these are there's a QR code on the bottom here if you'd like to contact our team and ask us any questions you might have, or if you have a project in podcasts or audiobooks that you're interested in discussing. Of course, we're happy to share our knowledge and to help you do it if it's something you want to step into. We also have a couple of downloadables that are available there. So I'll bring Melinda back in at this point. And I'm going to stop. Let's see. There we go. Stop sharing. Okay, here we go. So I think I'm back with you. I'm not so familiar with this platform, but it's very good. I'm not so familiar with it, Melinda. So please.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the wonderful presentation, David. Yes, we do have a questions from the audience in the chat. So
Okay,
many
very good.
questions. I will pick the best question for you. So, what are the key elements of a successful podcast?
I'm sorry, Melinda. It's a little bit hard. I'm sorry to interrupt. It's a little hard to hear you. If I look at the chat, will I be able to see the questions?
Yes, you can see the questions in the chat.
I'm looking. I say all, but unanswered. Is that the way to do it? I don't see any questions for some reason.
Yeah,
Let me
click
try
on the
refreshing.
messages you can see in the chat.
Because the audio is not so good. It's a little bit hard to hear you. So
Oh, one
it's
second.
hard for me. It's hard to hear your question. Hmm. Why am I not seeing Q&A? I'm in the Q&A. Is that where I should be?
No, you can see in the chat.
Oh, the chat. Okay. Let me see. Looking. Here we go. Messages? No? I'm looking for the chat.
Okay, now can you hear me?
I can hear you, but it's a little bit hard because you're far away
Okay.
from the microphone. Remember, I am an audio guy, so but my hearing's not so good. So I'm trying to find the chat here. I'm trying to find the chat. If you can direct me to that. I see messages. I see resources. I see people in session. I see Q&A, chat. Okay, here we go. Got it. Thank you. All right. So are you at the top of that? Let's see. How can professionals effectively use their voice to expand their influence through podcasts and audiobooks? Is that where you are, Danielle? Melinda?
Yes. If you go
Yes.
down, you
So
can see a lot of questions over there.
go down. Storytelling evolved.
Yes.
Is that a good one? Which one? Maybe if I
Yeah.
can see it. Yeah.
Yeah, you can
So
go ahead with the question. What are the key elements? Key elements of a successful podcast.
I'm sorry, I'm just having trouble hearing your audio.
What are
It's
the
because
key elements of a successful podcast?
I see key elements. I see how a
Yes, yes, yes.
storytelling key
Go with the
elements.
question. Yes. Go with that
Uh,
question. Key elements.
go to the story elements. Did you say yes?
Yes,
Okay. Sorry, it's just hard to hear. Um, so the key elements are consistency. You want to be releasing regularly. What we see is a lot of podcasters tend to get started and then they lose steam. They just lose interest, or they realize this is not so easy, or it takes time, and then they fade. It's called pod fade. So that's one major thing that you have to consider. Um, um, and you want to be very clear about the value you're delivering to your audience. It's nice to do interviews with people you know and all of that, but one of the things I like to say is you want to have the why. It's back to the why. Why am I doing this? How do I want to position myself to my market? And what value can I bring? How can I serve them? So that's I think those are the key elements um, in terms of making things successful. And you want to release often and regularly. So I hope that helps there. Um, as far as the storytelling evolves, I talked about a little bit of this here. Um, it's possible to tell stories alone, just in your own voice as a solo. But I think it's very interesting to tell stories and bring them to life with a more produced podcast. This adds complexity and it adds cost, of course, to production. But it's kind of like mini documentary filmmaking that could be very interesting for your audience. Of course, we all understand that stories are how humans connect. And so conversations are nice, but as you've telegraphed in your question, uh, stories really, really are more engaging and compelling for an audience. Um, I'm looking for more questions here, Melinda.
yes.
So it looks like those are the
Thank
two
you.
major ones, right?
Yeah, you can answer them later. We are running out of time. Okay,
Okay.
so the speaker is waiting in the backstage, so you can answer the questions to them later. Okay.
Okay. Very good.
Thank you so much for joining this Day 2 Global Virtual Summit and sharing your wonderful presentation with the audience today. And please
You're
do
very welcome.
join our next speaker sessions and please post your questions and encourage them as well. Thank you
Very good.
and bye now.
Very good. Thank you so much. Enjoy your afternoon. Bye bye.